Fire, he cut her free from the wreckage. But what happened next changed his life, forever broken cowboy. The sun was just beginning to rise over the small town, casting a golden glow on the dusty roads and wide-open fields. The morning air smelled fresh after a light drizzle the night before, and the birds chirped their morning songs, unaware of the storm that was quietly approaching. On the outskirts of the town, a rancher moved through his routine, checking the fences, feeding the horses, and making sure that everything was in order. He was a man of habit, known by the locals for his quiet strength and kind heart. His hands were rough from years of working the land, and his face bore the sunburned lines of someone who had spent a lifetime outdoors. Life here was simple, predictable, and he liked it that way. As he walked along the edge of the pasture, his mind wandered to the ordinary tasks of the day. The horses needed fresh water, the cows had to be checked, and there was always something to fix. Yet amidst this normalcy, there was a sense of calm that he cherished. The rancher loved the quiet mornings most of all, when the world seemed still and his thoughts could wander freely. He paused for a moment to watch the sun peek over the hills. There was a beauty in the simplicity of life that he never took for granted. Suddenly, the stillness was broken by an unusual sound, metal scraping against metal, followed by a sharp, high-pitched crash. His heart leapt into his throat. The sound came from the winding road that cut through the hills, a place where accidents could easily happen because of the steep curves and loose gravel. Without thinking, he ran toward the noise, his boots kicking up mud as he sprinted down the slope. Something was wrong, and he knew it instinctively. As he approached, he saw a car half crumpled against a tree at the edge of the ravine. The rain from the early morning drizzle had turned into a heavy downpour, making the ground slippery and the wreckage even more dangerous. His heart pounded as he realized that someone was trapped inside. The car's doors were bent, the windshield cracked, and the frame twisted from the impact. A young woman was inside, her face streaked with dirt and blood, her hands pressed against the metal as she tried to shield herself. She was terrified, her eyes wide and frantic, and she screamed for help. The rancher didn't hesitate. He could feel the adrenaline surging through his veins, sharpening his focus. He grabbed the first tool he could find, a heavy metal bar from his truck, and ran to the car. Each step was difficult. The mud sucked at his boots, and the rain poured down his back, soaking his clothes. Yet he moved with purpose, his mind entirely focused on one thing: getting her out alive. He assessed the wreckage quickly, searching for the safest way to approach the car without causing it to shift further down the ravine. The young woman's voice cracked as she cried out again. He knelt beside the driver's side door, trying to reassure her. "It's okay, I'm here. I'm going to get you out," he said in a calm but firm tone, hoping to calm her fear. She trembled as she looked at him, her eyes reflecting both panic and a fragile hope. He could see the cuts on her arms and the bruises forming on her face, and he knew he had to act fast. Every second counted. He began working on the door, levering it with the metal bar, trying to bend the frame without causing more harm. The rain made everything slippery, and he could barely see through the streaks of water running down his face. His hands were scratched and bleeding, but he didn't notice the pain. The only thing that mattered was her safety. She cried and begged him to hurry, and he felt a deep urgency. Her life was in his hands, and he refused to let her down. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as he worked. He could hear the wind picking up, the storm intensifying. The car creaked and groaned under the pressure, threatening to collapse further at any moment. He spoke to her gently, trying to keep her calm. "I need you to stay still. I've got you just a little longer." His voice was steady, though inside his heart raced with worry. She nodded slightly, tears mixing with the rain on her face. Finally, with one last push and a surge of strength, the door gave way. The rancher quickly helped her slide out of the car, supporting her weight as he guided her to safer ground. She was soaked, shivering, and weak, but she was alive. He laid her down gently on a patch of higher ground, pulling his jacket around her to keep her warm. The storm howled around them, but for a brief moment there was relief. She looked at him with gratitude, her lips trembling as she whispered, thank you so much." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he scanned the ravine, realizing that the danger wasn't over. The storm was stronger than he had first thought, and the rainwater was beginning to rush through the area. The ground beneath them was unstable, and a sudden flash flood could sweep them both away. He helped her up, supporting her as they moved to a safer spot further from the edge. Every step was careful, deliberate, but the urgency never left his mind. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, and he refused to fail. Along the way, he kept talking to her, trying to keep her conscious and alert. "You're going to be okay. Just keep walking. I'm right here." His words were steady, but there was an underlying tension that mirrored the storm around them. She leaned heavily on him, her trust absolute, and he felt a strange connection forming in those moments, a bond created not by choice, but by circumstance. By the time they reached a small clearing, the worst of the immediate danger had passed. The woman sank to the ground, exhausted and trembling. The rancher knelt beside her, checking for serious injuries. She had cuts and bruises, but nothing life-threatening. Relief washed over him, but he knew the ordeal wasn't over. She needed medical attention, warmth, and care, and he would ensure she got it. He signaled for his truck, which had been parked a safe distance away, and carefully helped her into the cab. The engine roared to life, and the rain continued to pour as they drove toward the nearest hospital. On the way, she remained quiet, staring out the window at the rain-soaked landscape, still processing what had just happened. The rancher kept a careful eye on her, offering words of comfort now and then, trying to ease the tension that lingered between them. The drive seemed to stretch on forever. Every bump in the road, every splash from puddles, reminded them both of the fragility of life and the randomness of fate. They didn't speak much, but in the silence there was understanding. The rancher knew he had acted instinctively, but even he could feel that this moment, this rescue, was different. It was as if something larger had brought them together, if only for a brief, life-changing encounter. When they finally arrived at the hospital, medical staff rushed out to help. The rancher stayed with her until she was safely in the hands of the doctors and nurses. She squeezed his hand weakly, a silent thank you that spoke volumes. He nodded, trying to contain the emotions swelling inside him. As he stepped back, watching her being wheeled away, he realized that life had a way of changing in an instant. One moment, everything was ordinary. The next, it was extraordinary. As he walked back to his truck, soaked to the bone and exhausted, he reflected on the events of the morning. The calm of his routine life had been shattered by a moment of chaos, yet in that chaos he had found purpose. The rescue had been terrifying, exhausting, and dangerous, but it had also been a reminder of what it meant to care for someone else, to act with courage, and to trust instinct over fear. The storm continued to rage, lightning illuminating the sky, but he felt a strange sense of peace amidst it. He knew that the day was far from over, and that this was only the beginning of a story that would change both of their lives forever. He climbed into his truck, shaking off the cold, and drove slowly home, thinking about the young woman he had saved and wondering what would come next. That morning, a quiet town had witnessed a miracle hidden in the chaos of a storm. A man known for his strength and simplicity had become a hero in an instant, and a young woman had been given a second chance at life. Neither of them knew it yet, but their paths had crossed for a reason. The world around them would never be quite the same again, and the ripples of this moment would continue to spread far beyond the ravine, far beyond the storm, and far beyond the golden morning that had begun so innocently. The rain had not let up. It continued to fall in thick sheets, drenching the landscape and turning the ground into a slippery mess. But the rancher didn't notice the cold or the wet. His mind was entirely focused on the young woman he had just rescued. Though she was safe from the immediate danger of the wreck, he knew that her ordeal was far from over. Her body was trembling from shock, and her breathing was uneven, shallow at times. He could see bruises beginning to form on her arms and face, and he worried about internal injuries that weren't immediately visible. As he helped her into his truck, he spoke in a calm, soothing tone. "We're almost at the hospital." "You're going to be fine." She nodded weakly, leaning heavily on him. Her hands were cold, her teeth chattering as the cold rainwater ran down her hair and clothes. The rancher instinctively placed his jacket around her shoulders, offering as much warmth and comfort as he could. He glanced in the rearview mirror, catching the reflection of her face, eyes wide, lips trembling, yet filled with a fragile trust. Driving through the winding, rain-soaked roads, the rancher navigated carefully. The mud had made the path treacherous, and every turn required focus. He glanced at her from time to time. She seemed lost in her thoughts, staring at the rain sliding down the window as if trying to process the danger she had just escaped. He didn't press her to talk, He knew that silence could be just as comforting as words. Minutes felt like hours as they drove. The storm's intensity was growing, and the wind battered the truck's exterior, making it shudder with each gust. Yet the rancher remained steady, determined to get her to safety. In those moments, he thought about how fragile life could be. One second everything was normal, the next it could change forever. He had acted on instinct, driven by a sense of duty and compassion that he hadn't fully recognized before. When they finally reached the hospital, the bright lights cutting through the gray storm felt like a miracle. Medical staff rushed out, carrying stretchers and medical equipment. The rancher gently helped her out of the truck, supporting her weight, and guided her to the waiting hands of the nurses. She looked up at him, fear still lingering in her eyes but mixed with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. He nodded, saying nothing, knowing that actions often spoke louder than words. As the nurses wheeled her inside, the rancher stepped back, his chest tight with relief and exhaustion. He watched as she disappeared through the hospital doors, surrounded by people who could give her the care he could not. Yet even as he felt relief, a nagging worry remained. The storm was still raging, and she had been through a traumatic experience. The thought of leaving her here, alone and vulnerable, tugged at his heart. He decided to stay. There was nothing he could do outside the hospital, but he could wait, ensuring that she would be all right. He found a quiet corner in the waiting room and sat down, hands pressed together, heart still racing from the adrenaline of the rescue. Every few minutes he glanced toward the emergency doors, hoping for a sign that she was stable. The room was filled with the low hum of fluorescent lights, the occasional phone ringing, and the soft footsteps of hospital staff. It was a strange contrast to the chaos of the storm outside, yet the tension within him remained. Hours passed slowly. The rancher remained vigilant, unwilling to leave until he knew she was safe. Finally, a nurse emerged from the emergency room. She smiled kindly at him and said, "She's going to be okay. She has some bruises and minor injuries, but nothing life-threatening." "You did a great job bringing her in." Relief flooded through him, a weight lifting from his shoulders. He nodded, unable to find words to express the depth of his emotions. Once she was stabilized, the rancher learned that she had no family nearby and was unfamiliar with the town. He offered to stay with her until someone could be contacted or until she regained her strength. The hospital staff were grateful, recognizing his selflessness and dedication. Over the next few hours, he sat by her side, talking softly to her, keeping her calm and offering small comforts, a blanket, a sip of water, gentle reassurances. As she slowly regained consciousness, she looked around, her eyes meeting his. There was a mixture of fear, confusion, and gratitude in her gaze. I don't know what to say," she whispered. The rancher smiled gently, shaking his head. "You don't have to say anything. Just focus on resting." His voice was steady, full of quiet strength. She nodded, allowing herself to relax slightly, trusting him in a way that surprised both of them. During the long hours, the rancher noticed small things about her. The way she flinched slightly when moved, the way her hand trembled as she tried to hold the blanket around her, the fear in her eyes when the storm outside made the windows rattle. He stayed close, careful not to crowd her, offering reassurance through presence more than words. In those moments, he realized that saving her from the wreckage was only the beginning. The real challenge was helping her feel safe, helping her recover not just physically, but emotionally. Their conversations were minimal at first, consisting mostly of soft words and quiet encouragement. But slowly, as the storm outside began to wane, she started to speak more. She told him about her journey into the town, the reason she had been traveling alone, and how unprepared she had been for the rugged terrain. He listened attentively, offering understanding and empathy without judgment. Each story she shared deepened the connection between them, a bond forged in the crucible of fear and survival. As the night wore on, the rancher realized that this experience had changed him in ways he hadn't expected. He had acted on instinct to save a life, but he was now invested in her well-being, emotionally as well as physically. The adrenaline that had fueled him during the rescue had given way to a quiet determination to be there for her, to make sure she was truly safe. The storm had brought danger, but it had also brought two strangers together in a way that neither could have anticipated. By the early hours of the morning, the rain had stopped. The storm had passed, leaving behind a wet, glistening town and a sense of calm. Yet the rancher remained in the hospital, sitting in the waiting area, watching over her as she slept. He thought about the events of the previous hours, the crash, the fear, the rescue, and how everything had unfolded so quickly. Life could change in an instant, and he understood now more than ever the importance of courage, compassion, and being present when it mattered most. When she finally woke fully, the first thing she did was look for him. Relief and gratitude shone in her eyes as she saw him sitting nearby, weary but attentive. "You stayed," she said softly. He nodded. "I wanted to make sure you were okay." That simple statement carried more meaning than any words could express. It was a recognition of the bond formed through shared fear, trust, and care. Over the next day, the rancher helped her with small tasks, adjusting pillows, bringing water, and simply being present. She gradually regained her strength, and with each passing hour their conversations grew longer, more personal. They shared stories of their lives, finding common ground despite the short time they had known each other. There was laughter now, mixed with lingering moments of quiet reflection. They were no longer just rescuer and victim. They were becoming two people connected by an extraordinary experience, each aware that their lives had been forever altered. Even as she recovered physically, he noticed that the emotional impact of the crash lingered. She flinched at sudden noises, hesitated before moving quickly, and sometimes stared out the window for long stretches, lost in thought. The rancher offered patience and understanding, never rushing her, never pushing. He recognized that healing was not just about the body, but also about restoring a sense of safety and trust. His presence became a steadying force, a reminder that not all moments were filled with danger, and that someone cared deeply about her well-being. By the time she was ready to leave the hospital, the rancher had become an integral part of her journey. He helped arrange transportation, offered guidance on staying safe, and even stayed with her until she felt confident enough to move on. They exchanged contact information, promising to check in, but neither could ignore the deeper connection that had formed. They had shared something profound: fear, courage, survival, and it had left an indelible mark on both of their lives. As he finally left the hospital that morning, the rancher felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and fulfillment. The storm had brought chaos and fear, but it had also revealed the strength of the human spirit, the power of compassion, and the unexpected ways in which lives could intersect. He returned to his ranch, tired but reflective, knowing that the events of the previous day were only the beginning of a story that would continue to unfold in ways neither of them could yet imagine. That day, the storm had passed, but its impact remained. The rancher had not only saved a life, he had also been changed himself. The experience had reminded him that courage was not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. Compassion was not merely a choice, but a responsibility when someone's life hung in the balance. And sometimes, in the most unexpected moments, the world could surprise you with connections that would last far beyond a single day, a single storm, or a single act of bravery. The young woman's recovery progressed slowly but steadily. Each day in the hospital brought new challenges, small victories, and quiet moments of reflection. The rancher remained a constant presence, sitting by her bedside, offering reassurance and support. It wasn't just about physical healing. The crash had left a deeper mark on her spirit. She flinched at sudden noises, hesitated before moving, and sometimes stared at the walls for long stretches, lost in thought. He noticed it all, understanding that recovery was as much emotional as it was physical. She began to open up, sharing small pieces of her life with him. She talked about growing up in a busy city, far removed from the quiet rural town she had found herself in. She spoke of her fears and insecurities, of the sense of being unprepared for the challenges she faced. Her voice was soft but honest, filled with vulnerability that touched the rancher deeply. He listened attentively, never interrupting, offering small words of encouragement when needed. "You were brave," he said one afternoon as she recounted the moment the car had skidded. "Most people would have frozen, but you fought through fear and stayed alert." "That's how I could get you out." She shook her head, a faint smile appearing on her lips. "I didn't fight through it, I panicked. You saved me." His expression softened, recognizing the honesty in her words. He didn't argue. He simply nodded, acknowledging that the courage to act sometimes came from unexpected sources. Their conversations gradually grew longer. They laughed over small things, Her clumsy attempts to navigate the hospital corridors, his teasing about her fear of thunderstorms, the ridiculous hospital food that neither of them could stomach. Those moments of lightness were a stark contrast to the storm that had brought them together, but they were equally important. The rancher realized that laughter and shared stories were as vital to her recovery as the medical care she received. At night, when the hospital was quiet and the lights dimmed, they often sat together in silence. She would trace patterns on the blanket with her fingers, lost in thought, while he watched her carefully, ensuring she was comfortable. He saw the small details that revealed her inner struggle, the tight grip on the blanket, the subtle flinch when a nurse passed by, the hesitant movements when she tried to sit up. Each observation guided him in how best to support her, how to offer comfort without overstepping. One evening, she finally asked him about his life. "Why do you do this? Why do you stay here helping me?" Her eyes searched his face, looking for honesty. He paused before answering, choosing his words carefully. "Because someone did it for me once," he said quietly. "And because I believe that when you have the chance to help, you take it. No one knows when their time might come, or when they'll need someone to be there for them." She nodded slowly, absorbing his words. There was a sincerity in him that went beyond words, a depth of character that she had rarely encountered. As the days passed, the bond between them strengthened. She began to trust him not only with her physical safety, but with her thoughts and emotions. He encouraged her to speak freely, to confront the fears that had taken hold after the accident. "It's okay to be scared," he would say. "What matters is what you do next." Slowly, she learned to move without hesitation, to face each moment without letting fear control her. His quiet guidance and unwavering presence became a steadying force in her life. The rancher also noticed changes in himself. The rescue had initially been instinctive, a reaction to danger, but now he realized that it had opened something inside him. He had always lived a simple, solitary life, but caring for her had revealed a side of himself that he hadn't fully acknowledged: empathy, patience, and a willingness to invest in someone else's life so deeply. He found himself thinking about her when he was away, wondering if she was comfortable, if she was eating, if she felt safe. For the first time in years, he was aware of emotions he had long kept buried. During her recovery, family members arrived from out of town. They were grateful for his heroism, their eyes filled with tears as they thanked him over and over again. But their presence also created a new dynamic. She began to realize that the connection she felt with the rancher was unlike anything she had experienced before. He had been there when she was at her most vulnerable, acting without expectation of reward or recognition. That realization left her both grateful and conflicted. She had been saved by a stranger, yet she now felt a bond that was difficult to define. One afternoon, as she sat up in bed and watched the rain tap gently against the window, she reached for his hand. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. The rancher squeezed her hand gently. "You don't need to, just focus on getting better." "That's thanks enough." But there was an unspoken understanding between them, a recognition that their lives had been intertwined by circumstances beyond their control. They had shared something profound, a moment of fear, courage, and survival that neither would forget. The hospital staff, too, began to notice the unique dynamic between them. Nurses would smile knowingly as they passed by, and doctors occasionally made light-hearted comments about the inseparable pair. Neither the rancher nor the young woman paid much attention to it, but the subtle acknowledgments served as reminders that their story was extraordinary. They were no longer just rescuer and victim. They were companions in a shared journey of healing and discovery. As she continued to recover, small challenges arose. There were moments of pain, frustration, and fear, physical discomfort from her injuries, anxiety about returning to the world outside the hospital, and the lingering trauma of the accident. The rancher remained steadfast, helping her navigate each obstacle with patience and care. "You've come this far," he would remind her. "Don't let one day undo all the progress you've made." His encouragement was never forceful, never demanding. It was quiet, steady, and deeply reassuring. One day, after weeks of recovery, she finally asked him to sit with her outside in the hospital garden. The sun was shining, birds chirped in the trees, and the gentle breeze felt like a gift after the long days of rain. She leaned back in her chair, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face, and for the first time since the accident, allowed herself to breathe fully. The rancher sat beside her, comfortable in the silence, content to simply be present. It was during moments like these that their connection deepened further. Words were not always necessary. The rancher's presence alone provided comfort and stability, and she began to realize how much she had come to rely on it. She felt safe, understood, and valued, not just as someone he had rescued, but as a person with thoughts, feelings, and experiences that mattered to him. That realization was both comforting and overwhelming. In the evenings, they often spoke about the future. She shared her dreams, her fears, and the uncertainties that life had presented before the accident. He listened, offering insight and perspective without judgment. He spoke of his life on the ranch, the quiet routines, the satisfaction of hard work, and the sense of freedom that came from living close to the land. They found common ground in their shared appreciation for simplicity, honesty, and the beauty of ordinary moments. As she prepared to leave the hospital, the rancher felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. She had grown stronger, more confident, and more self-assured, but the thought of letting her go was difficult. Their bond had become a source of strength for both of them, and the idea of returning to separate lives seemed almost impossible. He realized that the rescue had been only the first chapter in a story that was far from over. The young woman, too, felt the weight of their connection. She had been through a traumatic experience, yet the rancher had been there every step of the way, offering guidance, comfort, and unwavering support. She had learned to trust him, not just with her safety, but with her thoughts, fears, and hopes. That trust was rare and precious, and it left her with a deep sense of gratitude and admiration. On the day of her discharge, the hospital staff applauded quietly, acknowledging the extraordinary journey she had undertaken. She turned to the rancher, eyes glistening with tears. "I don't know how to say goodbye," she whispered. He smiled gently. "You're not saying goodbye. We'll stay in touch, and remember, no matter what happens, you survived this, and you're stronger than you think." As she walked out of the hospital, supported by the rancher, she felt a sense of liberation. She had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty, and had emerged stronger, with a newfound understanding of courage, trust, and resilience. The rancher watched her go, knowing that their lives had been forever changed by the events that had brought them together. That day marked a turning point. The young woman's recovery was complete, but the emotional journey had only just begun. The bond formed in the wreckage and strengthened through recovery would continue to shape their lives. The rancher had not only saved a life, he had helped a person reclaim strength, confidence, and hope. And in doing so, he had discovered something within himself, a capacity for empathy, connection, and love that he had never fully recognized before. As they parted ways, both were acutely aware that their lives would never be the same. The accident, the rescue, and the recovery had created a shared experience that could not be erased. It had built a foundation of trust, gratitude, and mutual respect that would guide them in the days, months, and years to come. And even as they stepped back into their separate worlds, the memory of that storm, that fear, and that courage would remain, a powerful reminder of how fragile and precious life truly is. The young woman's first steps outside the hospital were tentative but determined. The sun was shining, casting warm light across the hospital courtyard, and the gentle breeze carried the scent of grass and flowers. After weeks of confinement and careful recovery, she finally felt the freedom of movement, a reminder of how precious life could be. The rancher walked beside her, steady and calm, his presence a comforting anchor amid the uncertainty of stepping back into the world. As they moved together through the courtyard, they reflected on the journey they had shared. She spoke of the fear she had felt when trapped in the car, the moments of panic when it seemed impossible to survive. He listened quietly, offering reassurance not through words alone, but through his calm presence, his unwavering attention, and the simple act of being there. In those moments, she realized that survival was not just about escaping danger. It was about connection, trust, and human kindness. Over the following days, their bond continued to grow. The rancher invited her to visit his ranch, suggesting that a quiet space and some time outdoors might aid her recovery further. She hesitated at first, unsure if she was ready to leave the hospital completely, but something in his calm and gentle encouragement made her say yes. The drive to the ranch was quiet, both of them taking in the changing landscape, the rolling hills, and the open fields. There was a sense of peace in the air, a stark contrast to the chaos of the storm that had brought them together. Upon arriving at the ranch, she was struck by the simplicity and beauty of the place. Horses grazed in the fields, the sound of birds filled the air, and the distant mountains created a sense of security and stability she had rarely felt. The rancher showed her around, pointing out the fences, the barns, and the small cabin he called home. She listened attentively, occasionally asking questions, but mostly observing, taking in the rhythm of his life and the care he put into every detail. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, they sat on the porch, sharing a quiet meal. Conversation flowed easily now, filled with laughter, shared stories, and reflections on life before the accident. She told him about her family, her work, and her dreams, things she had not been able to think about while trapped and recovering. He shared stories from his life on the ranch, the challenges, the joys, and the sense of fulfillment that came from working with the land. It was a simple moment, yet it was profound in its intimacy. In the following weeks, they spent more time together, each day strengthening their connection. She helped with small tasks around the ranch, feeding the horses, tending to the garden, and learning how to care for the animals. The rancher guided her patiently, never rushing, always encouraging her to trust herself and her instincts. In those moments, she discovered a newfound confidence, a sense of self-reliance that had been shaken by the accident. Each task completed, each small victory became a testament to her resilience and strength. One afternoon, as they worked together to repair a fence damaged by the storm, she stumbled slightly and he caught her. Their eyes met, and in that moment there was an unspoken understanding, a recognition that the bond they had formed went far beyond friendship or gratitude. It was a connection forged in fear, trust, and shared experience, now strengthened by mutual respect and care. Neither spoke immediately, letting the silence carry the weight of the realization. As the days turned into weeks, the rancher noticed subtle changes in himself. He had always been a man of routine, content with solitude and the quiet life of the ranch, yet her presence had awakened emotions he had long kept hidden. He found himself thinking of her when she wasn't around, imagining her safety and happiness, and wondering how he could continue to support her. For the first time, he recognized the depth of his feelings, not just admiration or friendship, but a growing, undeniable affection. Meanwhile, she too began to recognize her own feelings. What had started as gratitude and reliance had evolved into something deeper. She admired his strength, his patience, and his unwavering integrity. More than that, she felt seen and valued in a way she had never experienced before. The accident had brought them together, but it was their shared experiences, the quiet moments, and the care they offered each other that had transformed their connection into something extraordinary. One evening, as they watched the sunset together from a hill overlooking the ranch, she finally spoke about the future. "I don't know what comes next for me," she said softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. The rancher looked at her, his expression calm but thoughtful. "You don't have to figure it all out today," he said gently. "What matters is what you do now, one step at a time. You've already faced more than most people will in a lifetime, and you're still standing." His words carried a weight of experience and reassurance that made her heart swell with gratitude. In the weeks that followed, they continued to spend time together, exploring the surrounding countryside, riding horses, and sharing long conversations by the fire. Each day brought new experiences, small challenges, and moments of joy. They laughed, sometimes argued gently over trivial things, and discovered a deep companionship built on trust, respect, and shared experience. The rancher marveled at her resilience and determination, while she found comfort and strength in his steadiness and wisdom. Then came a moment that changed everything. She confided in him about a personal challenge she had been facing long before the accident, a secret burden she had carried alone. Her voice trembled as she spoke, tears welling in her eyes. The rancher listened intently, holding her hand and offering reassurance without judgment. For the first time, she felt the full weight of her struggles lifted, simply because someone cared enough to listen and understand. The depth of his compassion struck her profoundly, and she realized how much he had come to mean to her. That evening, after their long conversation, they sat in silence on the porch, watching the stars appear in the clear night sky. The rancher spoke softly, reflecting on the journey they had shared. "I never imagined that one storm could change so much," he said, "but it did, and I'm grateful for it." Not just because I could help you, but because I've learned more about life, courage, and love than I ever thought I would." She looked at him, her eyes shining, and realized that she felt the same. The accident, the rescue, and the recovery had been transformative for both of them, reshaping their lives in ways they could never have anticipated. As time passed, they began to envision a life beyond the ranch and the recovery. Plans were discussed quietly, dreams shared tentatively, and hopes expressed cautiously. Both recognized that their bond had grown into something rare and meaningful, a connection forged in crisis, nurtured through care and solidified by trust. They were no longer defined solely by the events of the accident, but by the shared understanding and affection that had blossomed in its aftermath. The rancher reflected often on the day he had rescued her. He realized that moment had been more than an act of bravery. It had been a turning point in both of their lives. One decision, one action, had led to a series of events that transformed not only the young woman's life but his own. He had discovered a depth of emotion and connection that he had never known, and in doing so, had found a new sense of purpose and fulfillment. The young woman, too, carried the lessons of that day with her. She had faced fear and uncertainty and emerged stronger, with a renewed sense of confidence and resilience. More importantly, she had discovered the power of trust, compassion, and human connection. The rancher's unwavering support had shown her that even in the darkest moments, there could be light, hope, and unexpected bonds that endure. Their story became one of quiet inspiration. Friends and neighbors noticed the change in both of them, the way they supported and respected each other, the way they moved through life with a sense of shared purpose, and the way they laughed and found joy in simple moments. Though the accident had been terrifying, the aftermath had revealed something extraordinary, the capacity of human beings to connect, heal, and grow together. In the end, the rancher and the young woman understood that their lives had been forever intertwined. The accident had been the catalyst, the rescue had been the bridge, and their shared recovery had solidified a bond that neither could ignore. They had faced fear, embraced courage, and discovered love and friendship in a way that was both unexpected and transformative. The story closed not with dramatic fanfare, but with quiet fulfillment. They sat together on the porch of the ranch, watching the sunset, the world calm and serene around them. The past remained, a reminder of danger, fear, and courage, but the present was filled with hope, connection, and a shared understanding of what truly mattered. They had been changed forever, not just by a single act of heroism, but by the compassion, trust, and bond that grew in its wake. As the stars began to appear in the sky, they smiled at each other, recognizing that life was fragile, beautiful, and unpredictable. And though the storm had tested them both, it had also given them a gift, a second chance at life, and a connection that would endure far beyond that fateful day. Together, they stepped forward, ready to face whatever came next, knowing that they were stronger and braver because of what they had shared, and that some moments in life born from fear and courage could truly change everything forever.